Now that we're off to that great boomer start, um, welcome everyone to the first of what I hope to be many tough talks. I am Eric Rolon. I am joined by the awesome researcher and author Ken Ammi from TrueFreeThinker.com. He has agreed to hop on and have a little conversation with me regarding the Rephaim, the Nephilim, the men of renown from the Old Testament, and then which are touched on briefly in the book of Jude. So, without further ado, Ken, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Allow myself to introduce myself. It's I always do a contextual introduction because who knows the kind of stuff I could tell you about myself. But contextually, I call myself an independent researcher, and I've attempted to specialize in what I like to call systematic biblical paranormology. So that includes Nephilology, and of course, something else we talked about the other day, maybe doing a different show on angelology and cherubology and
Sure,
seraphology, but
that'd be great.
that's another show. Okay, so I've written quite a few books about this topic. And, I was laughing at myself because the other day when we talked, remember you asked me to tell you about the books, and I
Yeah,
realized I forgot two of them. I totally just forgot to mention two of them. So, anyhow, I've kind of looked at as many aspects of this issue as I could, from what the Bible says to what apocryphal or pseudepigraphical works say, to what scholars have to say, to what people that I call the pop researchers have to say, to what Bible dictionaries and encyclopedias have to say, as well as Bible commentaries and as well as pastors. And then I'm also constantly discussing these issues with multiple people every single week. So it's something I really enjoy delving into. So I'm hoping we can bring some clarity to an issue that's, for probably various reasons, an issue that can become very complicated very quickly, and that there's a lot of misunderstandings about as well.
sure. Well, and I got to say, I appreciate the work you do. I'm looking at your Amazon page right now, and is this something around 50 books that I'm seeing here?
Uh-oh, you froze
Oh,
right after Amazon page.
oh, am I back now? Oh,
Yeah,
goodness. I'm no, I'm looking at your Amazon page here, and I'm seeing something around like 50 books that you've written thus far.
yeah.
That is outstanding. Now,
Well, yeah.
did I hear correctly
Yeah.
that you have one either just released or is going to be releasing here in short order?
I released one just a couple weeks ago.
Very good, very good. Well, excellent. So yeah, for anybody joining our stream tonight, it's going to be focused largely on the Canaanite tribes, the legends of old, the men of renown, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, and I'm sure we'll have our areas where we probably agree, like good old friends. We'll probably have our areas where we disagree, but we'll see where the conversation takes us. So I've watched a little bit of your other content there, just to kind of get a sense of what I'm getting into. And you mentioned the disuse of the word giant, or the misuse of it inside the Old Testament and in our, I guess, our current day and age, from translation issues and discrepancies. Do you want to go into a little bit on that?
Yeah, especially with your unintended pun that we're going to largely talk about
I'm
that. Was that unintended?
full of them. I used to do stand up.
Okay. Well, that was very punny. But okay, no more punishment.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Sorry, Rapunzel.
Got
Okay,
a
I'm
live
done.
one here.
I'm done. So yeah, I wanted to challenge us to not use the vague, generic, subjective, multi-usage, and often undefined English word giant.
Okay. And what is your
Okay,
reasoning for that?
right. So for one, it has various things that range from meanings or definitions to usages, and a meaning or definition and a usage can be very different. And usages also tend to change with time. So just in the common parlance, right, and just good old-fashioned conversational English, it can mean various things. It could be a metaphor, like someone's a giant of industry, right?
Mhm.
That doesn't tell you anything about their size. And then when someone says giant, if they're generally, they'll be implying something about subjectively unusual height,
Mhm.
but you don't know if they mean a few inches, a few feet, a few entire body lengths, right? You don't know.
Mhm.
And a lot of the people who are dealing with these kind of issues will do entire lectures, entire books, entire articles using the word giant, never once bothering to define it. And if you're paying attention, they'll use it to mean multiple different things. And they're not telling you that along the way. So you kind of have to know what you're looking at. So now, biblically, when you see the word giant in some English versions, it's either rendering, not even translating, okay? It's either rendering the word Nephilim or the word Rephaim.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that means that when you see the English word giant in your Bible, it's not implying anything about height, because Nephilim or Nephil or Rephaim or Repha, none of those words imply anything about height. So the reason it's in your English, in some English Bibles, is because those English versions are rendering, not even translating, from the Septuagint, from the Greek version.
Okay.
Now the Greek version rendered, didn't even translate, rendered Nephilim, Rephaim, and also Gibborim, all as gigantes.
Okay.
Okay, so that's where we're getting that English word. But gigantes means earthborn. It also implies nothing about height. Okay, so you have three different languages, right? English giants, Greek gigantes, Hebrew, Nephilim, and Rephaim. None of those words imply anything about height. And also, it's interesting that, especially if you think about Gibor or Gibborim,
mm-hmm.
some pop researchers do speak of the Gibborim as if they're a people group, the
Mm-hmm.
Gibborim. It's like, well, no, it's just a descriptive term that means
Mm-hmm.
might or mighty. It's not a tribe, it's not a race, it's not anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that shows you, amongst other things, that gigantes can't necessarily refer to height because it's being used of a word that means might or mighty.
Sure.
Right. So
Now,
therefore,
say if you're able to establish then that one of these tribes that modern day Bibles renders as being gigantic or super tall, say you're able to establish that they are of an unusual height, then I guess for the sake of argument, is it fine to then substitute inside giant because we have an understanding of them being of gargantuan size? Would that be something that you would allow?
well, that's a big if. Let's
Big
start
if.
there. So I would say
Challenge accepted.
If we define what we mean by the word, then sure, go ahead and use it.
Okay.
But the challenge is, if we're referring to Nephilim, let's just say Nephilim. If we're referring to Rephaim, let's say Rephaim. If we're referring to unusual, subjectively unusual height, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. We'll probably get into that. Subjectively unusual height, then let's say that, or just something a little less cumbersome than subjectively unusual height.
Yeah,
Something.
I guess for like the sake of research and the sake of argument, we could say that what is understood about the Nephilim and the Rephaim is that they are angel-human hybrids. We can both agree on that, correct?
Yes.
So then I guess we could say, in a sense, and this is pulling from the Latin and the Greek as well, we can call them monstrous or monsters. Not necessarily saying that they're of monstrous height, but just monsters in general. Would that be fair?
I might go with chimeras, but hey, whatever.
Hey, I like chimeras too. We can talk that. So it's interesting that you mentioned gigantes, because I've done a fair bit of word research in this as well, and I did get to watch your debate recently with Gary Wayne, and I know that the word giant, Nephal, Rephaim, Nephilim, that was kind of where you guys got hung up, and it kind of felt like it stilted the conversation. So I've gone into the etymological dictionary just to see, where the roots where these words are coming from.
You mean the online etymological dictionary?
Well, there is, as well as others. I've
HarperCollins.
HarperCom. I don't know if that's.
I'm only asking because I did a video specifically.
Oh yeah, Douglas Harper.
I did a video specifically about that horrendous thing that they did with that word.
Well, what's interesting, and I'm kind of heading you off at the pass here. I see that they were talking inside here derivation from Gegenes, meaning earthborn. They say it's untenable, and then they talk inside here also. Let me see if I can share the page here. They speak in here as well about. We have from Latin gigas as well as from Greek gigas, usually in plural gigantes, and I'll have to go back to your video and actually look that up. What I do find to be really interesting, though, is when we get into right now, I'm on theoi.com, all about Greek mythology, and it actually talks about the Gegenes, or the word that they say gigantes or gigas is derived from, and it talks about them right there, earthborn. I believe it's called, is it Gegenes or Gegenes? I'm not
Well,
sure.
one thing is if you want to approximate the actual Greek, there's no hard G in Greek.
Okay.
That's why, for instance, most people say Septuagint, but that's a hard G. It's really Septuagint.
Okay, so would it be
So
like
that's why it's
Gegenes?
it's gigantes rather than
Okay,
gigante, right? Or gigas rather than gigas. And this, I guess, would be gegenes.
Gegenes. Okay.
I mean,
And
I would imagine.
looking through, I guess, where they first originated, it talks about them appearing inside the Argonautica, Apollonius, Rhodius. What I did find interesting inside here is that they are described as being earthborn, but it's a very specific earthborn. It's a very specific kind of, I guess, rendering of giant, if you will. Inside here, it describes them being a tribe of 6-armed giants who fought the Argonauts on Bear Mountain in Mysia throughout I guess, the course of this epic. The one thing that I did find really interesting, though, is when it talks about seeing these guys and how they were laid out on the beach, much like the timbers that were hewn for the ship by the woodman's axe. It talks about them laying to soak till they're ready to receive bolts. And then it talks further about these guys being laid up on the shore, talking with their heads resting on the sands and their feet being deep underwater. So this story here, and the fact that they're also throwing boulders into the pass to keep the Argonauts from going in, this to me seems like we're talking of people that are of an incredibly abnormal size. I mean, if they're big enough to throw boulders and or lay on the beach with their legs way deep into the water, that to me seems like, I guess we could refer to that as being like what a modern day person would call a giant. That and the fact that they have 6 arms makes them of monstrous look and size. What would you think on that?
One thing is you got a little ahead of me because I was gonna circle around to that.
Oh,
No. Sometimes instead of gigantes, it seems that there's some Septuagint manuscripts that have gigas.
okay.
So then people are more comfortable claiming that actually is giants. But then that just begs the question, what does giants mean? And then
And
we get into a whole other issue, which is what's known as a word concept fallacy,
okay,
which would be that if somebody is called a giant, then by definition they're subjectively unusually tall, which again we saw is not necessarily the case because it can be
yeah,
used metaphorically. And by the way, and I've pointed this out many times, I've been called a giant many
as have
times
I.
throughout my life, including by my wife. She has called me a giant many times, but I'm only 6 even. So that's not really impressive in modern day USA, you know.
Sure, yeah. It's I
So
suppose
there's
it's
right.
subjective to the observer.
So that's why we're going to have to eventually drill all the way down to okay,
Sure.
let, there's one issue what the Nephilim might have been referred to as, but it's another issue whether there's a description of them
Hmm.
that justifies us thinking that they're subjectively unusually tall.
Sure, and that I think that is absolutely fair.
Now, as
Um,
far as Greek mythology, and yeah, I think that maybe, okay, so you have the concept of the Titans, and there's more than one generation of Titans. You know, it's the second one that has the weird body configurations, the lower body of
sure,
serpents,
the
100
snakes.
arms, you know, all this crazy stuff. But I would imagine that those are faint memories of the pre-flood days being retold in these mythical tales, right? Because from my point of view, what they're talking about is that the sky and the earth mated and gave birth to the Titans.
Yep.
Okay.
The blood of Kronos, and then
Well, yeah, I mean, you know how Greek mythology is. There's variations all over the place, but in general, I'm thinking, okay, well, the sky and the earth mating, that tells me angels coming down from heaven and human women from the earth, right?
Sure.
So it seems to me that the reason that there's so many similar tales throughout the world of the most ancient sorts is that because at the Tower of Babel event, when people lived in relative proximity, there was a commonly known and shared history. But then after that, humanity dispersed and took with them what was then history, but eventually changed in this or that way, was told and retold, and eventually we call it myth or we call it legend.
If I can add myself. Oh my gosh.
There you go. Welcome back.
Oh, dude, this is all sorts of right. All sorts of right.
Well, I'm done. I said everything I wanted to. So good night.
I was able to hear you. I know that nobody can see or hear me though. So I found out that I can, in fact, refresh my page over here, and it makes everything go.
That's cool. I didn't allow any dead air. I just kept yapping until you showed up again.
Right. Somebody's over here in the corner with a hi-hat and a couple of cymbals, just keeping us.
Exactly what I.
But no, that's really super interesting. And I admire your take on, you know, and well, not just admire, but I really appreciate your take on the not just ancient rendering of the words, but the actual translation, what people have grown to associate it with, and then kind of finding that firm line on, okay, what are we actually talking about here? And you know, if we can decide we're talking about the same thing, then we proceed. The last little bit that I want to touch on was with regards to the name gigantes or giants, when it talks about those giants being of old. I wonder when it does reference the earthborn, if looking at this Greek mythology website that I got pulled up over here, if inside there we're able to at least understand that when they're talking about earthborn here as being gargantuan people, is it possible then if the word that was in place of giant inside the Bible was originally meant to be earthborn, is it possible then that we're also talking of a gargantuan sized person? And then another question as well, or I guess not so much as a question as it is a comment. It's interesting here when we look through the word gigantes and we go through this encyclopedia of all these different named giants throughout Greek mythology, I do find it really interesting insight here about how we get a sense of their size. In one of the instances here, it talks about them piling mountains on top of each other. We have another one here where he fought in the Titan Wars. We know the Titans, according to the mythology, were absolutely gargantuan in shape. So is it possible then that say if inside the Bible the word giant was switched out with earthborn, given that this earthborn definition describes them as being humongous, could we then go on to say that if we see earthborn, that it's not necessarily saying, sure, they were just born of the earth, but that they're possibly talking about somebody of humongous stature in comparison to just the average man?
Well, let's let the demonic cat out of the bag here. Okay, so why bother referring to them as earthborn? Isn't that a given, right?
Well, and I guess that's where my question lies. Is earthborn then synonymous with giant? And then are we able to understand, okay, if we call them giant, we call them earthborn, we're calling them of gargantuan size. At least so going through this route, it seems like we could.
Well, but we're still just talking about word. We're not talking about a description yet. Now we're still just talking about words.
Well, I'm talking about the description that's given over here, where it describes it as being really large. Right. If we go off the description, then I think we could.
Yeah. Well, but then when we're importing that description into the Bible, we're going to have a lot of problems. So what I was trying to say is that we don't know why the Septuagint translators or renderers did what they did. We don't know. They didn't tell us. We don't have any record of it. So could they have been playing off of any sort of Greek mythology? Perhaps they were. Who knows? I mean, maybe they picked that word specifically in order to attempt to imply something about what Josephus would end up saying that
Sure.
it does seem that the Greeks were writing mythology about what the pre-flood Nephilim were doing. So
Sure.
perhaps,
Okay.
but of course
Well,
that
hey,
doesn't.
we've gotten somewhere. I like that. At least the perhaps there gives me
Well,
hope.
sure. But my point overall is we just don't know. We can speculate, but we don't know. And if they were tying the Genesis 6 affair, as I call it, to Greek mythology, that also doesn't necessarily tell us that that's an appropriate thing to do. So the reason I'm saying we're still dealing with words is because we're not sure that we can or should import these Greek mythological definitions into the Bible to understand the words that are being used there, especially
Gotcha.
when we're dealing with a Greek text from a couple hundred years before Jesus, rather than the Hebrew written millennia before that.
Sure. And also if we go from our warning written to us in Revelation 22, we know that those who add to or take away from this, their reward is taken away in heaven. So it's like there's the inherent danger in trying to add to or take away. Well, excellent. Well, hey, got the hard part out of the way. The rest of this is going to be smooth sailing.
Oh, good.
But I have looked through some of your research, and like I said, I watched some of your content online, and I wanted to know, have you written a book that deals with individual tribes, or has it been just addressing them as a whole?
Yeah, in my book, What Does the Bible Say About Giants and Nephilim, a styled giantology and Nephilology, I do have a chapter specifically on Rephaim, and then specifically dealing with, are the Gibborim a people? What about the Anakim? So yeah, I mean, I get into all the ones that are mentioned for us, and it's part of the issue that seems to confuse a lot of people. Remember, we talked about the 36 quote unquote giant tribes. Remember that?
Yeah.
And we ended up both recognizing that there's not 36 because some of them are AKAs for each other. So that knocks a bunch. Or also, it seems that Rephaim was a tribe that had consisted of various clans, is the way that I would put it, right? So Rephaim is a main group under which there are subgroups such as Anakim.
That'd be like saying the same kind of thing as just referring to them as Canaanites, being that they lived in the land of Canaan.
Right. So for instance, Goliath was a Repha. He was of the Anakim. He was a Philistine, and he was a Gathite. He's a Gathite because that's the city in which he lived. He was a Philistine because that's the region in which he lived. He was an Anakim, or a son of Enoch, because of the clan he was in, and he was a Repha because of the tribe he was in.
Sure.
So then, there you go. All those names, some of them are just AKAs, like Zamzumim, right? It's just an AKA for Rephaim, so you can't count them as more than one.
Yeah, and that's really because you were mentioning that a guy reached out to you and he said, I've written this article about the Nephilim and the Rephaim, and I'd love you to check it out. And you mentioned that he had these 36 tribes put inside there, and that was really what inspired me to do this. This here is, I still add to it. I was actually building on this today. I'm up to 51 pages with sources cited and a bibliography inside here.
Careful, you might end up with a book there.
Oh my gosh! What I have thought about doing, if I somewhere end up, I guess, reaching a level of notoriety that makes people want to read what I have to say, I thought about just taking the individual research papers and just putting those together in kind of a compendium of sorts.
Gotcha.
Just because I don't know if 51 pages is going to be enough for me to do a book, but who knows?
Yeah.
The one thing I did find really interesting in my whole story and my whole jaunt going into delving into the history of the Bible and getting into, what did certain words actually mean? It arose from, this would have been going back a couple of years ago when Stephen Hawking died, and a cousin of mine had put up this little homage to him on his Facebook page, just lauding over him and talking about what a gift he was to science and the world in general. And I said something along the lines of, I appreciate his incredible donations to science and what he's done for the world. We have indeed lost an incredible mind. I just don't agree with his views on God, but I agree that he was an incredibly gifted person. And the person, I guess they took that as an attack, my cousin, and they came back at me with a bunch of questions all relating to the Bible and slavery in the Bible and cruelty and suffering and genocide, or at least perceived genocide, and all this undue and unjust war. And they leveled about 6 or 7 questions at me and just kind of left it. And you and I both know that it's easy to ask a question, but it's oftentimes much harder to answer said question. So I told him, I said, look, I don't have answers presently, but if you give me some time, I will dig and I will find these answers for you. And one of them was, okay, let's start addressing the violence in the Old Testament. You know, what was that all about? Because I'd really only read through the Bible one full time up to that point, and that was going back a couple of years. So I was like, you know, I better dive back in. And when I started in on the violence of the Old Testament, tribal names kept popping up again and again. I kept seeing the Amalekites. I kept seeing the Amorites. I kept seeing Anakim referred to. I kept seeing the Hittites referred to a lot. And so I'm like, okay, well, you know, who were these tribes? And so you get into chasing down, okay, where do they stem from? What's the lineage? And so I figured, well, I mean, there's got to be somebody who's written about this. So you hop online, and I kept finding this nonsense where you have almost, it was like probably 16 different sites, if not more, just had the same exact information seemingly copied and pasted. And what I thought was really strange was that you kept seeing these same 36 tribes, and then they would list a list of like 20 something people that they claim to have been gigantic in the Bible, even though nothing may have been said about their actual height or their size beyond, you and I both know, the whole Og, king of Bashan, his bed being between 13 and a half feet to 15 and a half feet. We know about Goliath, his height being between 7.1 inches, possibly up to 10 feet. Sorry, 7 feet 1 inch, possibly up to 10 feet. But that was really sort of it. And that's you know, depending on what cubit you're using and what reference you're using to define said cubit. But suffice it to say, I started taking on all these tribes one at a time, and I was able to narrow down from the tribes that are actually named as Nephilim to the ones that are actually named as Rephaim, a number more like 29. What's been your experience with getting into that? Oh, I feel it coming. What you got for me, Ken? Come on. Gloves off now.
Okay, well, I'll just bottom line this bad boy. All right.
Explain me a thing, Ken. Let's have it.
Nephilim didn't make it past the flood in any way, shape, or form, period. So there's no such thing as Nephilim tribes post-flood.
Okay, now what makes you say that?
I was just nobody post-flood is related to them, period, full stop.
Okay.
For one, because there's no reliable indication of that. That's it.
Okay. Now, do you mean the Nephilim that would have died during the flood? Obviously, because there's dead, nobody can be related to them post-flood?
Right.
Okay.
Because that's the only Nephilim there ever were, is the pre-flood ones.
Okay. Is it possible then that even though it doesn't say so much in the Bible beyond when it talks inside Numbers 13:33, where it says, you know, we saw their descendants of Enoch, we saw their the Nephilim who come from the Nephilim, or something approximating that. Yeah. So I know it mentions them being Nephilim there, and we know that that's post-flood. I know that you've also, inside one of your previous talks, you mentioned that you have spies that come back from the land giving first a good report and then a bad report. And I feel like you're chomping at the bit to go into that. So if you want to.
If that's where you want to go, we can go there, because that to me is the key. That is the key, because if you want to talk about actual biblical evidence for the three main features of the pop researcher teaching on Nephilim, and it's not just the pop researchers, it's also scholars.
Yeah.
The three main points are: there's post-flood Nephilim, they're related to Anakim, and they're very, very, very tall. The one and only place in the whole entire Bible you're going to get either of those three things is in one single verse, which is Numbers 13:33. It doesn't exist anywhere else. There's zero support for it anywhere else. So that's why Numbers 13:33 is the mother of all Nephilim texts. All two of them, by the way.
Okay.
And
Well,
not even texts, verses, just one single, two sentences is what we get in the Bible. But that's the most important one because of that. So if you end up believing that, then you will use that to turn it into a worldview, a hermeneutic, via which you're going to start reading other stuff. So, for instance, you're going to jump back to Genesis 6:4, and you'll end up claiming that it's telling us about post-flood Nephilim when it does no such thing. So instead of making all these assertions, why don't we go into Numbers 13 a bit?
Sure. And I guess a quick question then before we jump into there, because we know inside Genesis 6:4 does say the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and then again after. We know that it doesn't say after the flood
Right.
per se. We do see, and trust me when I say, like, I get super into like the actual wordplay, as I know you do too, where it's like if I don't see it exactly there verbatim, then I'm not going to make an argument for one way or the other. We do see inside Numbers 13 that it does say, you know, when we saw the Nephilim. So, or who the guys who come from the Nephilim, what they say. So here's an interesting question then. Taking that into consideration, would it be possible then for, even though the Bible doesn't say as much in such distinctive words, would it be possible then for Nephilim to be synonymous with Rephaim and vice versa? Is that a possibility?
I couldn't even imagine any such a thing.
Okay. Now, and is your reasoning just because we don't see the word Nephilim actually described then past Numbers? Is that why we just see Rephaim largely?
Right, because I've heard many people claim that Rephaim is just an AKA for Nephilim. But no matter how many people I ask, nobody seems to be able to tell me how that's the case, besides that it helps them contrive alleged evidence that doesn't actually exist.
Sure.
I mean,
Okay.
honestly, that's it. I mean, anybody can make that claim, but why? Besides that, people have some kind of obsession about getting Nephilim past the flood.
Right.
I really
Yeah.
couldn't even imagine why anybody would imagine claiming any such a thing.
Yeah. And I've heard some of the arguments about that. Let me go up here to Deuteronomy 13 for us. But I've heard people talking about the, you know, like, hey, can we get him past the flood? What happens when we're past, you know, the spies report inside Numbers 13:25 through 33 there. And I've heard several different ideas or theories as to how the Nephilim are still around after the flood. I've heard people say, "Oh, is it possible that they survived the flood?" And we know that according to Genesis, I guess it'd be 6 through 8, we see that it says only Noah and his family survived the flood.
That's something that's affirmed about 5 different times in the Bible, incidentally.
Yeah, and then like if people want to get into the wordage before it says only Noah and his family survived, it says everything that crept on the face of the land, or everything that was walking on the land. It says that all died off, and they'll go, oh well, it doesn't say, you know, what was floating on the water. Say before we get to only Noah and his family survived. So I feel like that's a fair ruling out.
Okay, good.
There's another argument I've heard, and I want to see where you land on this. If we take the idea that angels and fallen angels can be interdimensional beings, you know, they can exist. Essentially, they're able to enjoy more levels of reality and depth, more dimensions than we are. Is it possible that ne'er-do-well angelic beings and possibly creatures, is it possible that they could have been spirited away into another dimension throughout the flood so that everything on earth is dead and then some were brought back and dropped off? Is that a possibility?
You mean the angels coming back after the flood and doing it all again?
No, I mean, is it possible for, say, like a remnant of fallen angels who hadn't actually disrobed of their oikaterion to sin with the daughters of man? Is it possible that they could have taken a clutch of them and spirited away, and then when the flood was over, dropped them back off?
Oh, well, that's certainly a unique take on it.
I mean, because we've seen that angels have the ability to take people where they want. We see Satan take Jesus up to the top of the temple. You know, he takes him up so he can see the whole world. We've also seen
Okay.
Peter taken directly out of jail by an angel. We know that God can take people away. We saw him
Yeah.
take Enoch. We know that Elijah went up in a whirlwind of fire, not a
Yeah,
chariot, but there
Philip
were chariots.
also. Yeah, I know. And by the way, I'll probably laugh a lot and don't take it personally.
Oh, I don't.
For one, I'm having a blast. And for
As am
two, I
I.
just love, yeah. I mean, okay, here's what we're dealing with. There's literally zero data in the Bible about how Nephilim could have or would have gotten past the flood in any way,
Yes,
shape, or form. So people who want to claim that will literally invent anything that they can.
you're right.
And I thought I've seen them all, that maybe they were taken away and brought back. That's definitely a new one. So kudos to you, my dear sir.
I appreciate that.
Okay, is it possible? Well, let me put it this way. Okay, what would you say that Nephilim had anything to do with the flood?
In terms of corruption on the earth at a genetic level, I would say that was the reason why God decided to wipe out everything on the face of the earth, to get rid of that bad blood, as it were.
Yeah. If we do a show about angelology, I think we might want to touch upon that issue, because there's some arguments to be made there, but I don't want to get into that right now. So let's say that they were at least a reason for the flood. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, if the Bible tells us no less than about 5 times that only Noah, his family, and some animals survived, inventing ways to get Nephilim past the flood is implying that God failed.
Yes,
that's all it is.
Yep, okay? And I've heard that argument too, where it's God isn't in the habit of failing.
They thought of a loophole that God missed. So they were taken away and brought back, or they made it through genetically, or more angels fell. Any of these stories, that's the main problem that you're going to have. They're all contrivances. They're all made to fill a gap, in a gap that isn't even there. And they're all implying that God failed somehow. So when we talk about Nephilim surviving the flood in any way, shape, or form, in outer space, underground, genetically, I don't care how, you're going to contradict the Bible 5 times. So then some people opt for claiming that it happened all again post-flood. More angels fell and they did it all again, which also implies that God failed. I mean, what a waste the flood was. That God got rid of everything, and they just came right back and did it all again.
Well, and like you said, if we just have that verse in Deuteronomy to go off of, then those 2 verses, they at least would say that we've got them before the flood. We have them
Numbers, yeah.
Like you said, there's Numbers. Well, it doesn't say how. And you're right with the whole suggesting that they hopped in boats. That does seem to imply that, hey, God failed in what should have been a done deal. And I don't know if you've gotten into the hydroplate theory of things, but if you get into the possibility of the hydroplate and the separated firmaments, that being a reason to why we have what looks like actual tectonic plate shifting, it seems to me that it wouldn't be very plausible that they could all get away on a boat. I think there's also a tremendous reason why Noah had to pitch that thing inside and out, because if it took him almost 100 years to put that thing together, I've seen tables that have worn out that were around back in the 60s, and they're no longer tenable for use. So
incidentally, this is just an aside.
Yeah.
But it might be interesting. Yeah, so it's because you're bringing up the flood, and again, let's not get into the flood, because that would just be another
3 hours.
Issue. But so you were asking me about my most recent book, and that's what it was about. It was called Noah's Flood, the Deluge, Global or Local. That's what it was about. And when it comes to Nephilology, the scope of the flood is irrelevant, because they either didn't survive it because it was global, or they didn't survive it because they lived in the region that was flooded. Either way, they didn't survive it. And so the issue with post-flood, more fallen angels doing it all again. First of all, you have the theological problem, which again implies that God failed.
Mhm.
And now I would appeal to Jude and 2 Peter 2. Now, both of them tell us that the angels that sinned were incarcerated. It doesn't
Yes.
say some of them. The angels that sinned, absolutely all of them, were
Mhm.
incarcerated. Now, the thing is, they don't tell us when. But I would say that it's logical and
Mhm.
theological that if God is sending the flood to cleanse the earth of all this mess, that would have been the time he incarcerated them,
Sure.
either intra flood or post flood, but right around there. Because again, we have no indication of anything like that ever happening again. There's only a one time fall of angels in the Bible. It's in Genesis 6, period, full stop, end of story. And now let me tell you, this is a fun one that I've dealt with very recently.
Yeah, let's have it.
So there's a teacher that was saying that the way Nephilim survived is because they went underground.
Mhm. I've heard of people
Okay,
talking about
right.
that.
Because after all, Genesis 6, in the particular version he was reading, which is the King
Mhm.
James Version, says there were
Oh.
giants in the earth. There were giants in the earth.
Oh
Okay.
my goodness. Oh, well,
But
he
then
solved it then.
but then make sure you don't read all the way to verse 17 because it says, guess what? Everything that is in the earth shall die.
Yep.
So sorry, you can't get away from it.
Yep.
You just can't. I
So
don't care if you're basing it on one particular version, it still
Mhm.
fails you.
So you brought up an interesting point where you mentioned inside we have Jude and then in Peter where it talks about the angels sinning, and from there we're able to extract, and also from 2 Corinthians 5:2 we're actually able to extract the Greek word oikaterion, the tent, the dwelling place of the soul, essentially for the angels, or the body that the believer
The
wants to be
state,
clothed
yeah.
with. Yeah, um, and so you mentioned that, so we had one fall. We only see one recorded history of the fall. Even some Revelations talks about the dragon, his tail swept down a third of the stars. So um because I've been wondering myself, I'm like, okay, if and I do believe that they were all wiped out during the flood, how did they end up back on the earth? Some people have wondered, oh, is it a curse that Ham suffered for seeing his father's nakedness? Was it a blood curse leveled on him?
Well,
There's
how did who end up in the earth? Are you talking about angels now or
No, no,
Nephilim?
no, I'm not talking about Nephilim now. I'm talking about Nephilim now. Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
well,
Rephaim. Menabra now. I'm talking about the
whoa,
offspring of
whoa,
England.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
Talking about
No,
all
no,
of it.
okay. Slow
Yeah,
down.
I'll put a finer point on it. What I'm mentioning now, I bring up Jew because it talks about them having to disrobe, and that being the sin of copulating with the daughters of men. That's what I understand that sin to be there, where it talks about the angels. He's
Yeah.
kept them under gloomy darkness, those who kept not their first estate, those who left their proper dwelling. So at least in my estimation, I take that to mean that the sin was them fornicating with the daughters of men. Do we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So then that, I guess, is what makes me ask my next question to you, because I was trying to figure out, okay, if we have here inside Jude where it talks about them being kept in eternal chains, those who left their positions of authority, left their proper dwelling, we have you and I both line up with our sons of God, and what that meant for the Old Testament in terms of a direct creation of God or an angel. Um, so it makes me wonder now, because as I thought about it, I thought, well, there's only one other way that I could conceive of them coming back on Earth, or Rephaim somehow populating the Earth again. And if it wasn't somehow like a blood curse placed on Ham for whatever sins he committed, it makes me wonder, because we only have one fall. And we see here that the sin that the angels committed was having relations with human women. So it makes me wonder, okay, is it possible that Satan, as this head angel over his horde, did he send a potential clutch of them? So, okay, you guys, I want you to start intermingling. I want you guys to mate with these women, and I want you to create the Nephilim that we have pre-flood. So they do. They go create Nephilim. flood wipes them out. That's when those angels who sinned are now being kept in eternal chains, under guard by Apollyon or Abaddon, whatever you line up on word-wise there. Is it
Well,
possible then that there was not a second fall, but that of that clutch of angels that Lucifer still has as at his disposal, is it possible that he said to them, hey, another legion of you guys, go and start copulating again while Israel is now being imprisoned or in the throes of slavery for the next 400 years in Egypt? Is that a possibility? Not a secondary fall, but a secondary wave from the angels who had already fallen.
no, because the implication is that every angel who fell.
But
Let's
it
get a
doesn't
little more.
say every
Okay,
angel.
hold on. Let's get just a little more technical.
Okay.
Fallen angel is not really a biblical term. They're referred to as sinners, right? Angels that sinned.
Well, if
Okay,
we count them as stars, like the Bible talks of their stars, and we see the dragon
well,
swiping
yeah,
a third of the stars out, then they did in fact fall,
cast.
as it says.
Well, no, they
Well,
did. I'm not arguing that
yeah.
they didn't. I'm just saying the terminology is
Okay.
more that they're sinners and they were cast. But whatever, that's
Okay.
fine. The implication is that the reason they're considered sinners is because they left what is generally translated something like their first estate and they mated with human women. That's what made them sinners. That was their sin. So, by implication, there is no angel that quote unquote fell but didn't engage in that activity.
I disagree with that, because then we have inside Job where the sons of God go to present themselves before the throne of God, and Satan himself is there. Now he's the head fallen angel. If we're taking
Mm,
if we're taking the Bible literature, in exactitude, it
uh,
says that he's there. He's also called the prince of demons inside the Bible, so that we know that he does rule over, and we're also told that he gets thrown into that outer darkness during the millennium to be released out again. So if he's not inside that outer darkness under chains right now, under that gloomy darkness under lock and key, then that there would destroy what you just said about all the angels, by extension, having fallen, also having sinned and copulating. Because I personally don't think that
uh,
Satan himself would have
uh.
slept with. Okay, so all right, now defend your point then. Let me hear it. Let me hear it.
But see, now you're taking us off into the other show we want to do, which is angelology. So I'll just cut to the chase.
All right,
Satan
let me
is
have it.
not an angel. He is not an angel. He's a cherub.
Okay. And what makes you why would you say cherub is not an angel?
Because cherubim are cherubim, angels are angels. It's
Well,
it's
we
a
also have
categorical
seraphim.
distinction.
Then what are the seraphim?
That's another category of being. There are three different categories of being. There's angels, there's cherubim, and there's seraphim. They all look different from one another. They have different job titles and they have different job functions.
Okay.
So there's different categories of being. It's just like the logical law of identity. One is not the other because the one is the one, the other is the other.
Okay.
So
And
he's a cherub.
that's a point that I'll have to disagree with you on, because then what do we know the archangel Michael as?
Well, as far as we know, he's the only archangel. So there's
Okay,
regular angels, there's archangel, but those are
what
angels.
but what's his designation then? Is he just an angel? Is he a cherub angel? Is he,
No, he's
what is he?
yeah. See, now we're not supposed to
Because
be talking about this in this show
well, and we
because
we
we
can
haven't even gotten into numbers yet. But no, he is called an archangel, so there's no reason to apply to him a category of being that he is not. He is an angel. He's just the arch one.
okay. And I guess that'll be a point that we disagree on, because I have it a bit differently, but I think
But
the
see,
point still
okay,
stands.
okay, yeah. I mean, you seem to be saying that cherubim are some kind of an angel, right?
I do believe that they are an angel.
Okay, hold on then. Why don't you say that angels are some kind of cherub?
I guess that would be fair to say. But if we have seraphim and cherub, if we have seraphs and cherubs, and if we believe that they're both angels, then I wouldn't just say angels are cherubs. I would say, a cherubim is a type of, or a seraphim is a type of.
Right. So why not say angels and cherubim are all types of seraphim, or angels and cherubim are all types of angels and seraphim are all types of cherubim? Why categorize them all as angels? Right.
Because I don't think that angels and cherubs are all types of seraphim. I think seraphim and cherubim are all types of angels.
Okay, good. Stop there a second. But they're not, because the job function and the job title of a malak is exactly that. They're malakim. They're messengers.
Messengers.
And
yes.
cherubim are not messengers, and seraphim are not messengers.
Okay. Then
so you can't just collapse three different categories into one. It doesn't work anatomically. It doesn't work in terms of job title. It doesn't work in terms of job function. These are three different categories of being all together. They're doing different things, and they look different from one another.
Okay. Well, and like I said, that's an area that I'm gonna have to do more research in, because I don't fully agree with you there. But we will save that, as you said, for our demonology and angelology, because I would really love to get into that with you as well. But anyway, like last little bit I'll say on Jude is that the way I understood it, for a possibility of Rephaim or Nephilim being back on the earth, is that if we had a third of them in the original fall, then it would be possible then. Because the Bible doesn't say it doesn't, but it doesn't say that it does either. I think kind of with what we did come to terms with Earthborn, where you said, yeah, I suppose it's a possibility. I think we have to agree here that it is a possibility. It was not another fall, but it's another sinning that took place.
Well, because there's a few issues going on. Firstly, that we're still back to the issue of that. I guess they found a loophole that God missed. And so the flood was kind of a waste, because then he had Nephilim run around the earth again. But the problem is, you're going to Jude, who talks about angels, and then you're talking about whether they came back, but then you're referring to Nephilim and Rephaim coming back after the flood. So that's a gigantic mess, because are you talking about angels? Are you talking about Nephilim? Or are you talking about Rephaim?
Not Nephilim or the Rephaim that were pre-flood coming back. What I mean is a whole new breed.
Okay, but for one, there's no such thing as pre-flood Rephaim. There's no such thing.
Then let's call them pre-flood Nephilim. I guess I would have, I can concede that, because we don't see the word Rephaim pop up. Unless we end up somehow deciding that Rephaim and Nephilim are synonymous, then yes, you were correct. We don't hear Rephaim being talked about pre-flood.
Right.
And
so
I don't think that they came back. What I'm saying is I think it's the only way that I can conceive inside my mind that they did end up on the earth again. If we have numbers which says we do have Nephilim again, and that's after the flood, and then we see Rephaim being talked about every time after that, or these different tribes that are of the Rephaim, then to me, a second copulation occurring, that to me seems like that's about the only other way that you're going to get them back on the earth, because we do know that the Rephaim are on the earth. And if we can at least the Rephaim being on the earth.
Okay, I think that you're going to discover that you've created a very good explanation for a non-issue.
Ooh.
Okay, so let's get into Numbers 13, because if we don't do that,
I'll pull it up right now.
Yeah, it's just circling around the drain. You know what I mean? So let's get into that. So part of what we need to pay attention to is how people talk about the report. And by the way, I like how you wrote there, the spies reports, plural. That's very important.
Yes.
So I'm glad you did that. So when you were talking about the second report, you used terms such as they, and you use terms such as it says, or some people say, well, the Bible says, or Moses wrote, but that's all way too generic. We need to get down to who said it, why they said it, what was the reaction to it, and does it jive? Okay, so let's look at this. So,
oh my gosh.
One important thing is, don't just read Numbers 13:33 and then go off and create an entire all-encompassing theory from it. You need to interact with the narrative of the chapter, which is that we have 12 spies that are sent into the land of Canaan to reconnoiter it, right?
Yes.
And so they come back from spying out the land, and here's what it records for us that they said it flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Enoch there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negeb, the Hittites, Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. Okay, so that's one report right there. All right? All indications are that that report is accepted as is. And I call that the original report. Okay. Now, it says, but, and I'm reading the ESV, by the way, in case that's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, this is NASB over here.
Okay, so yeah, I don't care. I could read any version, honestly. If you want me to switch, it doesn't matter to me.
You're fine. Yes,
Okay.
ESV is what I usually do my Bible study with.
Okay, so then after that report, it says, but Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once to occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. So it doesn't tell us why he said that, but he apparently discerned that there was some concern. And I could understand why, because the historical and cultural context is the Israelites at this time were itinerant and they were tent dwellers. Mm-hmm. And now they're being told about how they're going to have to confront, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different people groups who are described as strong and who dwell in cities that are large and fortified. Whoa. So that was obviously disturbing to them. And Caleb discerned that. So he just encourages, okay? Mm-hmm. Then we're told, then the men who had gone up with him. Now we end up finding out that Joshua sides with Caleb. So this is the other 10 spies, okay? And here's what they say. We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. Okay, pause. So instantly we can at least say that these guys are unfaithful and disloyal, because God commanded them to do this, and they're sitting there in front of the Israelites saying, guess what? We're not going to be able to. Right there, they're at least highly suspect in their character. All right. Then it specifies to us that after that discouragement, then they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land they had spied out, saying, and I'm going to pause all over the place right here. Oh, yeah, so they say, the land which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. Okay, well, hold on a second. The original report had it that the land flowed with milk and honey, which is something affirmed in the Bible around 20 times. So that right there is a straight up contradiction. Period. All right. And then all the people that we saw in it are of great height. Let's set aside for a moment that great height is just as subjective as big, tall, or giant. Just set that aside for a second. If you recall, the original report described the people of the land as strong, and even in their original discouragement, they complained that they are stronger than we, but all of a sudden, they just claim that all of those 6 people groups are of great height. So that's an embellishment right there. Okay. And we actually have no real indication that was the case. This is just their assertion. And then they go on to say what the ESV has as, there we saw the Nephilim. Pause. Wait a minute. The original report referred to the Anakim, Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, and Canaanites. It didn't say anything about Nephilim. So that's another straight up embellishment. Okay. The Sons of Enoch, who comes from the Nephilim. Now, again, this is the only indication in the whole entire Bible that the Anakim are related to Nephilim. And that's also based on how Versions differ a little bit on how they word that, but let me throw this one at you. If you check the Septuagint, the Greek version of this verse, there's no mention of Anakim. So you're not going to get Anakim related to Nephilim from the Septuagint. It just doesn't exist. And that's why so many scholars will claim that this bit right here in the parentheses is actually a gloss. That's just a textual issue. And we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them. So for one, there's just a common sense issue, because when these guys get back to the Israelites, they don't yell, "Hey, you'll never guess what we saw. We saw the most awe-inspiring beings on the planet." They don't. The first thing they do is they go, "Hey, check out this fruit."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that just commonsensically, that doesn't make sense. Hey, check out this fruit. Okay, next thing they talk about is, "Oh yeah, it's a good land." Next thing they talk about is, "Oh, the people, they're strong." Next thing is they talk about cities. Next thing is they list the people groups and where they live. And then the original report, they just forgot. "Oh yeah, gosh, I forgot to mention the most awe-inspiring beings in the planet. They're right there too, duh." So all indication is that when these guys felt they had their back against the wall, they literally invented a tall tale, and they make 5 assertions about which the Bible knows nothing else. Nothing. There's not a single other verse to back 5 assertions. 1, that the land is bad. 2, that all the people in it are a great height. 3, that there's post-flood Nephilim. 4, that Anakim are related to them. 5, that Nephilim are very, very tall. You can't back that up with anything else in Scripture, period, full stop. So moreover than that, you'll notice that the original report specified where all the people groups live. Earlier in the chapter, we're told where the Anakim live. And now we're told the Amalekites, "Oh, they dwell in the land of Negeb." The Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, "Oh, they live in the hill country." Canaanites, "Oh, they dwell by the sea and along the Jordan." But when these guys make up a tall tale about Nephilim, they're not able to specify where they live, obviously, because they didn't exist. They were just making that up.
Or they saw them everywhere. It's either one or the other. I have a rebuttal unless you have more.
Yeah, one more thing.
Yeah.
There are probably a few more things I'm just forgetting, but if you go to Deuteronomy 1,
yes,
okay, where Moses is relating this event, right?
Mm.
And he's saying, let me find it here. Deuteronomy 1, he's talking about this, and he's saying, "You murmured in your tents and said, 'Oh, because the Lord hated us, that he has brought us out to the land of Egypt,'" as they generally complain. And what Moses does is says, "Our brothers made our hearts melt, saying, 'The people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. And besides, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there.'" So when Moses is relating this event, he didn't even bother mention Nephilim. They're literally a non-issue, because Moses is more concerned with the actual dangers on the ground. He's not bothering with these tall tales about people who aren't there. And so it's kind of interesting that even here Moses engages in some hyperbole by saying that though the cities are fortified up to heaven, but I think that's really interesting. So from the Septuagint, you don't get Anakim related to Nephilim. From Moses' retelling, you don't even get Nephilim mentioned, even in passing. And from nowhere else in the whole entire Bible do you get any such thing. So let me just mention this. We have many, many biblical references to the people that lived in the land, and there's not a single reliable reference to Nephilim. We have descriptions of many people group around the land, not one single reference to Nephilim. We have descriptions of battles, nothing about Nephilim. We even have hand-to-hand combat, nothing about Nephilim. They're absolutely missing from absolutely everything else. So what we have here is unfaithful, disloyal, contradictory embellishers, whom God rebukes, incidentally, before making that statement, contradict Moses and Caleb and Joshua and God and the rest of the Bible, because all of them refer to Anakim being in the land, but not any of them say one single word about Nephilim. So I would say the choice is pretty clear. You're either going to side with Moses, Caleb, Joshua, God, and the rest of the Bible, or you're going to side with unfaithful, disloyal, contradictory embellishers whom God rebuked. It's really that simple. Because you're going to have to base your entire post-flood Nephilim theory upon one single verse, and it happens to be not only logically problematic, it's theologically problematic and textually problematic on top of that.
Interesting stuff. So I do have a little.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off for just one. So what I'm saying with all of that, all I'm saying is there's a reason why, if that one single verse was missing, let's imagine a world in which there's a Bible and that verse isn't there. It would read the way the Bible should be read, which is Nephilim lived pre-flood, the last of them drowned in the flood, end of story, full stop, period. And that's all there is to it. And that's how the Bible should be read, because nobody should believe this one verse in any possible capacity. Okay, I'm done.
Well, first of all, I disagree with that, but I appreciate the I appreciate all the support for your claims that you have. I think that's awesome. Not a lot of people, indeed, people who espouse to be super studied in this, go to the lengths that you have. That's very commendable. Oh shoot, not a lot of people write 50 books either, so that's pretty awesome. So, and this is just because of how I'm one of those people who believes that everything inside the Bible, every single word, as Jesus says, every single jot and tittle is inside there for a specific reason. Anything left in is left in for a reason. Anything removed is removed for a reason. When I read inside Numbers 13:25, there where they give the first report and they say, "We came into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit." And then they period there, and they're showing them the fruit that they brought. And he says, "Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong. As you already read, cities fortified, very large. Indeed, we saw the descendants of Enoch there." When I get to that point, so far, we've seen them say, "Hey, the land flows with milk and honey." But they still haven't said anything bad about the land. They just said, "Hey, the people who live in the land, they're strong. Big old cities, fortified. We saw descendants of Enoch there." When I read Amalek after that, to me, on first read, it seems like they're saying, "Yeah, and we saw Anak here." And then when he says Amalek is living in the land of Negev, the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, it seems to me like they have said essentially like, put a colon here. These are the tribes that we saw of the Anakim that are residing inside here. That's what it seems like to me. Then we go on to where Caleb, he quiets him and he says, "Hey, look, we should go up right now and take possession of it." He says, "We'll prevail over it." He doesn't say, "Hey, yeah, it's flowing with milk and honey. Yeah, we saw giants there." He doesn't say anything to confirm or deny. He just says, "Hey, let's just go up and possess it." As if to say, "Hey, sure, maybe there's some gigantic people here, but God's on our side. He told us to come here. He wouldn't leave us high and dry. Let's go in there and kick some ass."
Okay, pause a second. Why are you saying, sure, there's some gigantic people here, when nobody has said any such thing as of yet?
Well, it's the reason I'm saying gigantic is because if we go on oral traditions, which we know was carried all the way from Adam to when Moses is starting to pen some of his books and then further, then I would assume that they would have said, "Hey," they would have passed that oral tradition down. So I would have assumed here when they say we saw the descendants of Anak, that at least the people listening there would have known what that meant. Even though the Bible doesn't say here, "Oh yeah, they all went, oh shoot, the sons of Anak, crap." But it seems to me here that the fact that they said we saw the descendants of Anak, it at least means that to them, Anak means something. So but
we know what that means.
We know that they're,
and I don't know what is that.
Let me finish. Let me finish. I'm getting into it. So anyway, that's
okay.
The thought I put in.
I'm going to write a note about that.
Okay, write a note. So anyway, so I see Caleb. In my mind, he's like, yeah. He doesn't say anything in defense or support of what they say. He just says, "Hey, let's go up and take possession of it. We'll prevail over it." Then we get down to the bottom there where he says, they brought a bad report. First, they say, we're not able to go up against the people because they're too strong for us. He says, they brought a bad report to the land. They had spied out sons of Israel, saying, land through which we have gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw are of great stature. He says, we saw also the Nephilim there, the sons of Enoch, part of the Nephilim. We were like grasshoppers, yada, yada. So like on the one hand, he says, all the people we saw were of great stature. And then he says, we also saw the Nephilim. So it's possible that they saw just people that were bigger than them. And then, oh shoot, yeah, we saw some of the Nephilim here as well. When they say first that the land flows with milk and honey, to me, that does not negate that the land can also devour its inhabitants as well. And a bad report for me doesn't necessarily entail an untrue report. Like say you had stage 4 terminal pancreatic cancer, and I, as your doctor, I did your test. I said, hey, look, you've got stage 4 terminal pancreatic cancer. I haven't given you a good report. I've given you indeed a bad report, but it doesn't make it any less true. So then, well, I'm not done. I've still got some more support for it. I'm gonna bring this full circle. So God, he calls the land that they're going into in Exodus 3, when he's talking to Moses from the burning bush, he calls it a land flowing with milk and honey. But he also goes on to say in Leviticus 18, he says the land vomited out its inhabitants because of its defiling. Inside Leviticus 18, he says, for the land has become defiled. Therefore, I have brought its punishment upon it. So the land has vomited out its inhabitants. But as for you, you are to keep my statutes, my judgments, shall not do any of these abominations, neither the native nor the stranger who resides among you, for the people of the land who were there before you did all these abominations, and the land has become defiled. So for God, it's not a problem for him to say, hey, look, it flows with milk and honey, but it's still defiled. So
afterwards.
Well, this is Leviticus. This is before Numbers.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
So God says, he says, okay, the land has become defiled. That's what he says. But he also said it flows with milk and honey. So the spies, for me, them saying, hey, look, here's the fruit. It flows with milk and honey like we've been told. However, it still devours its inhabitants. And they're talking, in one sense, they're talking about the produce of the land and what can be found there in terms of what to eat, maybe what to build with, or what to sleep on. And then they're talking, on the other hand, about the posterity of the land, the people that reside there. So going on further from that, and just to touch on Exodus, he says, so I've come down to rescue them, talking about Israel here, from the power of the Egyptians, to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And he says, to the place of the Canaanite, the Hittite, Amorite, Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. So the initial reports there, it's like, okay, if God can say it, it seems like the spies, they didn't say the land's defiled. They just said, hey, it consumes its inhabitants, which if we've done our history, then we'll, inside the Bible, we'll know that according to what it says, that the Rephaim were cannibalistic. Going further, God confirms to Israel that they're going to be going up against the Rephaim. He doesn't refute what it said by the spies in the initial report back in Numbers 13. In Deuteronomy 125, you brought up where says they took some of the fruit of the land, they showed it. Moses says, hey, you grumbled in your tents because the Lord hates us. He's brought us up out of the land. He says all that again. Only he doesn't mention the Nephilim there that time around. However, if we go to Deuteronomy 9, what Deuteronomy 9 actually says is you have God now talking, because he's been talking to Moses. He spoke to Moses, and Moses has said, okay, the Lord says, or the Lord has spoken to me thusly. And he says to them, in Deuteronomy 9, you have, hear, O Israel, this is God speaking, or speaking via Moses. He says, you are to cross over the Jordan today to go in to dispossess nations greater and mightier than you, cities great and fortified up to heaven, a people great and tall, the sons of the Anakim, whom you know, and of whom you have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Enoch. Know therefore today that he who goes over before you as a consuming fire is the Lord your God. He will destroy them and subdue them before you. So you shall drive them out and make them perish quickly, as the Lord has promised you. So God there, he has confirmed right there already that they're going to be fighting the Anakim. They're going to be taking on the descendants of Enoch. So going further on, if we get into if we treat Numbers 13 as, like I said before, putting a colon behind Anakim and then listing off those other tribes, we would understand Anakim. But it gets to the end there where it says Anak, who come from the Nephilim, if we take Numbers 13:33 at its face, then we know that the Anakim were Nephilim. However, if we go to Deuteronomy 2:8-11, it says, "So we passed beyond our brothers, the sons of Esau, who live in Seir, away from the Arabah road, away from Elath and Ezon Geber. We turned and passed through the way of the wilderness of Moab. Then the Lord said to me, do not attack Moab, nor provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession." Then it says, "The Emim lived there previously, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they too are regarded as Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim." So we know right there, the Anakim, they're Rephaim. We know that the Emim are Rephaim. But if we go further still, then we get down to Deuteronomy 2:16-22. It says, "So it came about when all the men of war had finally perished from among the people, that the Lord spoke to me, saying, today you shall cross over the Ar, the border of Moab. When you come come opposite the sons of Ammon, do not attack them nor provoke them, for I will not give you any of the land of the sons of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot as a possession. It is also regarded as the land of the Rephaim, because the Rephaim previously lived in it. But the Ammonites call them Zamzummim, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place." And then if we go further still, then we get to the Amorites. And we were talking before, like, we don't exactly see how big were the Nephilim. We understand that they were great, that they were mighty. So I think we could probably assume that they were pretty strong. If they're descended from angels, it's possible that they might have had some kind of other powers that regular man wouldn't have. But when we get to the Rephaim, we see them inside Deuteronomy 3:1-11. And that's when we're talking about Og, king of Bashan, and we're talking about Sihon, king of Heshbon. We're talking about those two kings being wiped out. And it says, at that time, we took the land from the hand of the two Amorite kings in verse 8. So we understand Og, king of Bashan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, are Amorite kings. So if we then jump to Amos, and we go to Amos chapter, where is it here? Amos chapter 2, verse 9. Let me pull it up real quick. This is where we at least get a sense of how tall these guys might have been. Where it says here, this is God speaking to them via Amos. It says, "Yet it was I who destroyed the Amalekites before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and who was as strong as the oaks. I destroyed his fruit above and his roots beneath." So we at least have an understanding there that the Amorites were Rephaim as well, and they're tall as cedars. Now, if we want to get into the technicalities of cedars, inside the native, cedars can grow between 98 to 130 feet. A cedar that's grown in a nursery, typically they'll top out around 30 feet before they're either taken and transplanted. They can also be between 8 to 12 feet in diameter. So if we allow for not just the flowery and poetic language, but also the exactitude of what Amos is saying here, because Amos is one of the prophets, and we also go off what God himself says here, then we know that at least the Amorites were incredibly, incredibly tall people. Now, if we have a distinction here that the Rephaim are great and mighty, which we just saw, then we see the Anakim, the Emim at least, and the Zamzummim all being a part of the Rephaim. If Numbers 13:33 is to believed that Enoch is part of the Nephilim, but he's also counted as Rephaim in Deuteronomy 2:8-11, then we'd have to say Enoch definitely is a Nephilim. And if, like him, the Emim and the Zummim are also Rephaim, then I think we could make a fair assessment and say that the Emim and the Zamzummim are also Nephilim tribes. And I'm not saying that the Anakim, the Emim, or the Zamzummim are as tall as the Amorites, because we don't get any description of how tall they are. We're just told that they're great and tall as each other. That's what I got.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh,
yeah, I took a handful of notes, but the main thing to point out is that none of that works without Numbers 13:33.
Sure, it does.
None of it. No, of course not.
If we negate Nephilim completely, it doesn't negate Rephaim, doesn't negate Emim, Zamzumim, and Anakim all being tall, and it doesn't negate Amorites from being Nephilim and also being tall as cedars. Rephaim. We can get rid of Nephilim completely, but it doesn't negate them all being Rephaim tribes and the Amorites being tall as cedars, according to Amos.
Oh, well, sure, but then they're Rephaim tribes, completely detached from Nephilim.
Well, and you mentioned before, you said this is the way the Bible should be read. However, this is me saying this is the way the Bible should be read, and neither one of us can say definitively one or the other that we're right in this, one way or the other. Because I would hate to fall in breach of Revelation 22.
Well, okay, I mean that's a separate issue because Revelation's talking about Revelation, but regardless, no, we shouldn't be adding or taking away. But we should be reading as is. So that's why I pointed out what you have if you don't actually believe one of the most deceptive statements in the Bible, then yeah, you end up with a Rephaim tribe, which is made up of various clans. We already talked about that. And then we can talk about how some of them were subjectively tall. And so what? Yeah, of course. Who cares, you know?
Well, how about the Amorites then?
Well, one thing I don't want to be misunderstood, as I often am, because I'm analytical and I'm asking for enough evidence to go on. People, for some odd reason, start talking to me about how tall people have existed, as if I deny that. It's really weird.
Oh, no, and I'm not asking you as if you're denying that. I'm just asking, what do we make of that verse that says they were as tall as cedars?
Right. So what I found strange is that you quoted us statistics about cedars. Why didn't you talk to us about oaks?
We could talk about the oaks of Mamre if you want.
Yeah, let's talk about oaks.
All right. What do you want to talk about the oaks?
Okay, so if you, I'm going to say for some odd reason, think that Amos was implying to us that we should conduct a ratio-based mathematical calculation correlating the height of cedars to the height of the Amorites. Where's the calculation correlating their strength to the strength of an oak? That's what I want to see.
I'm not saying that he's giving us a mathematical calculation by which we should then use to then infer the height. What I'm saying here is when Amos says they're as tall as cedars, the statement he's making right there is that they are not subjectively tall, but objectively tall. And not just objectively tall, but powerful. Taller than anybody else that they've seen.
Oh yeah, well, of course. No.
Yeah, so that's the main. That's the main.
That's point. A given. So the way I would put it is this. I think it's obvious Amos was telling us that they're big and strong. That's just obvious. To then, if somebody, as many people do, take a step to literally measuring cedars and saying, there you go, now we know how tall they were. That to me is unwarranted. Nobody would imagine any such thing unless they were suffering from what I call gigorexia nervosa, which is they want to construct people that were very unusually tall instead of just the common sense reading, oh yeah, these guys were big and strong. So we need to point something out that this is actually subjective, and it is subjective to the Israelites, males of whom in those days averaged 5 foot, even maybe 5'3". So that to them, somebody who was even 6.5 feet, much less 7 feet, much less 7.5 feet, would have been just absolutely gigantic. Sure. It is subjective to that.
Yeah, but this here,
subjective to that.
But to call somebody as tall as a cedar versus King Saul, who he knew was a head and shoulders above everybody else.
I'm not. I think it's almost like we have to claim to know too much about their mindset than we possibly know. So, for example, how many times here in modern day North America have you heard of tall person being told, "Oh, how's the weather up there?" You know, I mean, ridiculous stuff like that, right? So,
plenty of times, but I haven't heard tall people. I haven't heard somebody say to me, "Oh yeah, dude, have you met John over here? He's as tall as a cedar tree." I've heard, "Oh yeah, dude, John's a monster. John's enormous."
Well, exactly. So I would say if the Amorites were unusually tall, and we don't know how subjectively unusually tall. Good for them.
Well,
I hope they enjoyed it.
at least 30 feet that's how tall they were.
Well, but see, then you are actually implying a ratio-based mathematical correlation, and I don't see how Amos is even implying any such thing.
Not a ratio base, because I haven't given them like a factor by which like 2/3 or 1/4. Not 1 to 1.
Essentially,
we could say minimum they would have been around there if we're talking about trees that are grown in captivity inside a nursery. But we have inside the old world, they didn't do that. These, they didn't have tree nurseries like we do nowadays. So it's quite possible that these trees were way more gargantuan. What I'm saying, though, is if we do believe that every word of the Bible is true, and we do look at this, I can take that at face value and say, okay, he says they're tall as cedars. He's obviously referring to a very specific tree. He's also referring to a tree that they knew to grow really super wide. It makes me also wonder why Solomon, when they're constructing the temple, why he actually enslaves a Rephaim tribe to have them be the woodcutters of these cedar trees. Is it possible? Is it possible that maybe they needed some gargantuan people to be able to handle cutting these things down if they were indeed 10 to 12 feet in diameter? I think it's a possibility. And going off this here, I'm going to say that when he says tall as cedars, he's not meaning subjectively tall like a head and shoulders. He's meaning these guys were humongous.
So that's why I started by asking for the calculations on the strength of an oak.
I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
But see, based on this, you will have to end up claiming that they are thus and such strong because of oak is this and such strong. It has to be absolutely
I don't
literal.
have to get into the strength of them. I can just say that they were tall as that because Amos says they were
wait
tall
a minute. Hold on. You're taking every word as it's written, and that's what it's written. They are as strong as oaks. So at some point you will have to face the calculation and figure out, hey, I know that they were this strong because I know the oaks at that time were this strong. You're going to have to do that. So
okay,
what I'm saying
then I can go ahead and do that.
Right, exactly. But I'm saying there's a reason why nobody's bothered doing that, because they don't care about that. They just want to tell tall tales.
I care about it because I think Amos.
But all I'm saying is that you're not interested enough to have done that until I pointed it out. And I'm just telling you, nobody has, because all they care about is making people tall. They don't care about their actual description. So
I care about that when I see them say people great and tall. I assume that when he's saying great is either he's talking about their physical size, or he's talking about the number of them, or he's talking about both.
Right.
And it dawns on me now that I saw cedar when I read that. I didn't see oak, but now you can bet your ass I'm going to be looking up how strong a cedar is and how much tensile strength it's got.
This is just a caution. I'm just cautioning, because what you just said is incredibly important. You didn't even notice 50% of what Amos told you about them, because your focus is so much on looking for giants that you didn't literally even see a full 50% of the description. It didn't jump out at you, even though it's in the verse that you quoted.
Well, it'd be a tenth of the description, because he talks about destroying the roots above and roots beneath. So I mean, like, there's a whole lot more description there. But the point is understood. Exactly. But unfortunately, that belabors the point from going on to hearing him say tall as cedars. That shifts the goalpost.
Strong as oaks.
It shifts the goalpost, though, because we can, strong as oaks. I believe when he says great that they're already strong. I'm not denying that they're strong, but we're unfortunately we're moving the goalposts when we make it about, okay, why don't we factor in the oaks? Because what I'm talking about here is he says they're tall as cedars. Great, I already equate to being a given, to being strong, as even the spy says they're great and mighty. They're too strong for us. So I'm already assuming that they're strong. And I'm sure that they would have assumed that they were strong as well if we're going off their history of being oral tradition until we finally have the actual written word.
So that was just a caution. Just be careful about not plowing over stuff that seems irrelevant to you because you just have an end goal in mind.
And it was, I should clarify, it wasn't me that I'm trying to just lay the hat on these people were tall. It's so much more than that. And in the research that I've done on all these tribes, it's not been about just, oh yeah, they were tall. It's been about how powerful they were, how strong they were, how they're able to do various things.
That's actually the concern. So I would say the most clear statement we have about the issue of height, as if that's an issue. I don't even understand how that's an issue, but whatever. Is the Anakim were
Well, because
tall.
height's scary. Height's scary to people.
Well,
If you were 5'4" and you saw a 13-foot
well,
guy coming at
exactly.
you,
Right,
height is
right,
scary.
right. So we're told that the Anakim were tall, and they're taller than 5 foot even, or 5'3". Okay. Beyond that, we can't really say much more. But that the issue with the Anakim is that they were a force to be reckoned with for
They were
whatever
strong. They were
reason.
mighty. Yeah.
And right, that's what Moses is concerned about, and that's what he's talking to them about. Is this should be a real concern? Okay,
Exactly, and that's
right,
getting to
right,
the immediate
right,
next point. And the immediate next
right.
point was that I want to make is that the descriptions that we have of these guys, because like I said, the only one that we see an actual thing that we can compare to are the Amorites. Everybody else, we're just told that they were tall. We assume that they're taller than normal people. We know that they're mighty, that they're strong, that they're great in number, that they devour their inhabitants of their land. But all of that is completely superfluous if it ends up detracting from the gospel narrative as a whole. Because when I went on this journey to search out these tribes, it was me trying to understand what was the violence in the Old Testament about, and why are people so hell-bent on seeing God as some vengeful kind of maniac for having his people take out these tribes when they get into the land of Canaan? Like we see inside Joshua, they're just on the warpath for chapter after chapter after chapter. Well, finally, he's got to pass the torch to the other guys and say, look, bros, you got to take care of this because I'm old, man. I've done my time. Caleb was 80 years old when he finally took his city and got his what was coming to him. So that's actually literally going into the next part of the discussion that I wanted to get into, and that was
okay. Except I still had 8 more notes.
Oh, okay. Well, if we can go through the notes if you like, or we can jump down the violent war path and explain.
Yeah, we could get to that.
Violence.
I'll just plow through these because I'm sure you could respond to every one of them, and each one could lead to its own discussion. But so what you began with is correlating what you referred to as gigantic to Anakim. And I just pointed out the only thing we could say about them is that they were subjectively tall. Then the issue of the interaction between the spies. Well, it wasn't a formal, moderated debate. So that's part of why there's no reason to expect that Joshua or Caleb would object. In fact, all we know is there was an original report, something Caleb said, something they said, and end of story, until God lets us know that he's going to rebuke them for what they said. And the issue of it being called a bad report or evil report, whatever it is, it's not that the report was untrue because of how it's referred to. It's untrue because of its contents. There's literally nothing else to support their 5 assertions.
I disagree with that, but continue.
Yeah, well, part of it was you referred to how the land became defiled, but that was after the Numbers 13 timeline. So that
that was in Leviticus.
Oh, I thought you were saying that it was
Leviticus 18. Leviticus 18. That's when he's saying, "I'm going to be sending you." This is after the Exodus when they're starting to end there. So like that's beforehand, and then God reiterating again, "Hey, hear, O Israel, your God is one God. I am sending in you to dispossess a nation greater than mightier than you, tall." And then he goes into say the Anakim and names off other tribes. So like you have one that was before God literally saying it himself. They not only were they defile the land, but they had all kinds of crazy weird sex that he labels out there that we should never do in Leviticus 18. And then we have him after in Deuteronomy 9 when they're now to the edge of it. He's saying, "Hey, get in there and get after it." And he quotes what they said minus the Nephilim. He quotes everything else that they said, though.
Right. And
so, like, if it was good enough for God, it's good enough for me there.
Yeah.
And again, we don't know the full height of what these other Rephaim tribes were. All I'm going off for comparison is just the Amorites.
Yeah, and I would just say it's just internal to the narrative of chapter 13 that it is a contradiction. Okay. Then there's the issue of the Anakim being Nephilim, but of course we talked about how there's no data on that as far as how could that possibly be the case.
Well, I mean, it says it in Numbers 12:33, and you say that that's a contradictory report from untrustworthy spies. I see it differently than that. I see those
Well,
words being left in for a reason. And when Moses
well, they
penned
are.
his
Oh, of course, they are
what
left in for a reason.
well,
They're left
and when
in to record the words that God rebuked.
sure,
Just like what else is left in there? Statements by Satan. That's left in there. That doesn't mean we should believe him. We should just believe that he's a deceiver.
excuse me, um,
This is the reason
where does it say that
why.
God actually rebuked their words? Where does it say he rebuked their words?
Well, the only reason there would be for him to rebuke them is for what they did and said.
But where does it say that he rebuked their words? Because if you can point that out to me, then we have a link up here. But where does it say he
Well,
rebuked their words?
we do already. We don't need.
Mhm.
Anyhow, I can look for that if you want.
Now you're implying for something to be inferred, and now we're both in what I guess you
No,
would call
no.
my territory and me in your territory.
Okay, then let's ask another question. Why did God rebuke them?
Well, I believe God rebuked them because he had already told them back in Leviticus 18, and then inside the initial starting of the Exodus, he said, "Go inside there and go get what I left for you." He said, "I will go before you. I will send my hornets to clear these people out."
Right, right.
Even the angel of the Lord, who we know to be Jesus Christ, he even says, "Look, I cleared these people out before you even got here." He told them to go. He didn't say, "Go when you feel like it." He didn't say, "Question me every step of the way." He didn't say, "Get inside there and panic when you see how big they are." He just said, "Go, I will be with you." He's rebuking them because you have 10 against 2, 10 saying, "No way can we handle this." And you got 2 guys going, "No, I'm going to go get mine. I'm going to go get mine right now." That's why I believe God rebuked those guys that were in accordance with him. And we see later on that only Caleb and Joshua are the only people allowed to go in who were above the age of 21. And the rest of the tribe here who end up believing what these guys say inside, that we couldn't defeat these gigantic people or these Nephilim or these Rephaim, because they went, "Oh no, God told us to come here and now we can't take on these people. Oh, woe is us. Would that we had stayed in Egypt where we had 3 square meals and a bed." You only have Caleb and Joshua who said, "No, we will do this." So God rebukes the rest of them. And we know that, hey, their sandals didn't wear out. Their heel never swelled. Their clothing never wore out. But when it got to the end, hey, you guys ain't going in. Your kids can go in. You're not going in. And that was why they were rebuked, because looking at the giants that they potentially saw in front of them, or the people of great stature, the great, mighty, the tall people, the sons of Enoch, they looked at that and they went, "My God isn't big enough to handle that." And that's why God rebuked them. Because they've already seen at this point, they watched 9 plagues roll through Egypt. They've been led all through the desert by a pillar of cloud and fire. They watched Aaron's 2 sons get set ablaze for offering unasked for fire
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
sacrifice. They had fiery serpents. They had the ground open up. They've watched thousands of their people slain by God and by Moses' word when he finally runs that dude through who's getting down with the Moabitess girl, and then 15,000 guys die that night at the hands of Israel. Like, they've seen all this incredible stuff. They watched water come out of a rock twice, out of flint, as God says. And so now in my opinion, he's rebuking him because he's going, "I literally made it rain bread for months on end. I made so much quail it was coming out your nose, and you don't think I can handle these gargantuan douchebags? Okay, fine. Wander for 40 years, nominally 39, and your sandals won't wear out, but your kids, they inherit this." That's why I'm seeing why he rebuked them.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. It's just that what the text is implying to us is that their fear, their discouragement is what motivated them to invent a "don't go in the woods" type of fear-mongering scare tactic tall tale. So that what they ended up claiming was totally false. And it was based on their fear, obviously.
I
They
think what
wanted they wanted to back their assertion that it's okay for them to not do what God said because of let us make up all this stuff, right? This modern
personally,
day.
I think that
Go ahead.
they saw what they claim to have saw, but their lie that they do tell people is that we can't handle it. There's no way we can handle it, because God has already told them, "Hey, I'm going to be with you. You will dispossess the nations mightier than you." I think therein is the lie that he's really hit them for, because we already know that to God has no reason to mention Nephilim again, because they've already mentioned it, and God is assuming, at least what I'm wondering from God is, if he's naming these tribes that the spies talked about, he's figuring, okay, you people know what you're getting into, and I've already told you I'm going in here with you. Do you think I'm not going to be going in here? Why would I bring you out of Egypt to just let you get eaten alive by these people? So I think that the lie that they did espouse was them saying, we are not able to go up against the people. I think that was the lie, because he says they're too strong for us, maybe physically, but you've got Caleb and Joshua, who are the only ones actually relying on God's power. And they're going, no, let's, by all means, let's go up and take possession of it.
And then we're back to my note of how it could possibly be the case that there's post-flood Nephilim.
Well, I'm just going off Numbers 33 right there. That's what I'm going off of.
1333. Exactly. And that's exactly what I said up front, is you're going to be forced to build an entire all-encompassing theory based on one single verse, and a verse that's incredibly problematic. That's the problem.
Well, Genesis 6:4 is the same way. If we want to talk about the Nephilim pre-flood, we've built it all on that one verse. And if we see
that's
them,
why we can, and that's why it
cuts both ways. It cuts both ways, well, because
no,
if we fall into proof texting off one verse, then we're falling into literally the trap that everybody else does when they get into questions and theories about this, and it detracts from what this story is meant to point out to people. It's meant to say to them, hey, look, God had a reason for everything that he did. He has a reason, and had a reason for why he has Joshua go on this campaign all throughout Canaan and literally kill every man, woman, and child of so many tribes, and then only take the bronze, gold, and silver vessels for the temple, and everything else devoted to destruction. Like it detracts if we get hung up on that, because it goes too far out into the weeds, where no longer are we concerned with actually trying to build a gospel narrative and explain why God did have this be the case. It just comes down to a religiosity and a historicity battle, which I'm sure neither of us really wants to get into, because I know you won't move me on this, and I know that I won't move you on this. So then it comes to the next thing is, okay, how do we then use what we both know and understand to win souls to the kingdom and contend for the faith, as Peter says?
Yeah. So the one thing I would say is, yes, Genesis 6:4 is the only single statement that we have about Nephilim that's reliable. That's why really we shouldn't say much about them at all. We could only say that they lived pre-flood. We could say who their parents were. We could say they were mighty and well-known. We could say they didn't survive the flood, period. We shouldn't really have a Nephilology. That's all we got. So yeah, we only have that, and it shouldn't turn into this gigantic issue, but this is part of what people love to do, and they've loved to do it historically, is try to fill in gaps and make up things that sound more exciting. But my main concern is, if we're going to jump to the conquering narratives, my concern there is that we're actually not going to get the gospel true about them. We're actually going to invent a scenario and miss what God is actually telling us was the reason for that. Well, so you can get into that part of it if you want from here.
Yeah, I would say to that end, inside what I did write before, because I've detailed all the tribes, their origins, where they came from, what they did, what they were known for, where they're going, their descriptions and whatnot. And you're absolutely right. If we just make it about, they're fighting giants, then yes, we don't find the gospel inside there, which is why when I wrote this out, I make a distinction that according to what we know of that one tribe, the Amorites, they were objectively tall. We don't know exactly the size and the strength of the other ones, but we do know is they were half angel, half human. And then I think we can, the
Amorites?
The Nephilim. We know that the Amel. Sorry, I should have said there. So we know that the Amorites, like I said, they were tall. We know that the Nephilim, they're the progeny of the angels and the daughters of men. We know that they were half man, half angel, or half son of God. So going forward from there, what I've built with this argument is that when Israel is going through Canaan and they're having to wipe out these tribes, they're not just killing people, and they're not just fighting angels. They're fighting corrupt blood. They're fighting what we could call monsters. They're fighting humanoid angel offspring. And I believe a large part of why God told his tribes, hey, wherever you settle, do not intermingle with these people. Don't give them your daughters to wed. Don't give them your sons to wed. Don't take theirs in either respect. And I believe that was because he is not wanting to see his bloodline that is supposed to be a bloodline that Jesus is going to be born from polluted with fallen angel DNA. Because Jesus, when he came down, he didn't die for angels. He died for us. And so that's where I've built this argument on, is it explains why you see what amounts to like a heavenly eugenics program, because you've got Joshua here who is saying, look, I've got to clear these people out because I know the Israelite people, they're a stiff-necked people, and they are going to get down and dirty with whoever they're next to because it's their nature. So we got to remove them. And then we see when Judah and Simeon, they can't finish it out completely. God says, look, there'll be a thorn in your side for the rest of your lives now.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. If we just hang our hat on the whole giant gargantuan people, we're lost. But if we can both concede that they're angel human hybrids and they're fighting essentially monsters here,
we can't.
Okay, let's hear it.
We can't, because that is what you're doing. You are saying that they were out there battling Nephilim by any other name. So we're back to that. Your one and only support for that entire theory is, guess what? Numbers 1333.
And I only named 4 tribes that could be constituted as that. And inside that thing that I pointed out there, we only see that it says definitively that the Anakim were Nephilim. Now, you were talking about, the question comes up, okay, is the Anakim, are they a specific tribe or are they a full people? If they're a full people, then I would say that you have more tribes inside there. But the 4 tribes that we do see named, that I did point out to you, that are being referenced as being tall as the Anakim, are the Emim, the Zamzummim. And then we see the Amorites being called Rephaim as well. So I'm not saying that they're going through the land of Canaan wiping out Nephilim. What I'm saying is, if we take giant, we take Nephilim, and we take Rephaim out of the equation, what they are fighting is they're fighting hybrids.
Okay.
They're fighting people that are not full human.
Okay, so pause there a second. When you take Nephilim out of the picture, you have no such thing as hybrids. That's it. You're done. Where would you get the idea that anybody besides Nephilim were hybrids?
Well, if we go off Rephaim and their connection to Nephilim, then that's the case that we have. Well, hear me out. I'm saying, if we're say we look at them and we say their height is, say all of them were objectively gigantic, then we're looking at them as being abnormal people subjectively to Israelites. However, we're required to have that Nephilim connection. That way, when we see him saying, hey, look, the Rephaim tribes are here, then that means that they're fighting angel human hybrids, or they're fighting people that are not full-blood human beings. They're also fighting at points the Moabites and then themselves.
Right. And I think that you hit your own nail on the head. You said that you're required.
You are required. Absolutely
exactly.
Required. And that's why Deuteronomy 13:33 is a verse that you cannot take out and throw away as spies simply spinning a yarn. It doesn't work. Sorry, Numbers 13:33. You can't take it out. You cannot take it out and throw it away.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, you need.
You hit your nail on the head there.
No. Okay, so my point is, you're required to have that as believable. You cannot, and that's what I stated up front. It all boils down to one single verse. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's so many problems with it.
We only see Jesus wept in one book of the Bible. We don't see it in the other 3, but nobody says, hey, he never wept over Lazarus being found dead when he got there. Right. We only have one verse that describes that.
And that's why we have the issues of there could be many reasons that Jesus wept, but how do you get Nephilim past the flood?
Here we go. We only have the one verse. That's what I'm saying. There's a correlation there. We have one verse in one instance and we have one verse here. If we go off of that Nephilim verse inside Genesis 6:4, and if we take the Torah to have been books written by Moses, with the exception of maybe the last couple of chapters maybe being done by Joshua when they got to Canaan, then I don't think Moses would be in the habit of leaving in something said by some tribes guys that went out to spy a land that he then goes, they're lying, I'm not going to leave this in. I wouldn't see Moses doing that.
No.
But that's trying to get into the head of people that we don't know beyond the words that are here.
And so the Bible is full of recording of statements that are absolutely false.
Give me an example.
There's tons of them.
Give me an example.
Anytime Satan opens his mouth.
Oh, well, yeah, he's a father of lies. There's no truth in him. Yes, of course. But give me another example.
Well, sure. The woman that claimed to Peter that all the land they sold, the money was given to the church, which was not the case. I mean, it's just obvious.
And that was used for a purpose there, and that was used to tell a story, and that was recorded because it happened. It happened. Right. But the writer himself is not telling a lie. He's reporting on what this woman said.
Right.
Yeah. So then are we saying that Moses is reporting a lie, or are we saying that Moses is reporting the truth?
Moses is obviously, I would say, you like that one? Obviously,
antenna went up.
He's obviously recording what he stops to specifically tell us is a report that is, whatever you want to term it, bad, evil, unreliable. And that's after telling us about their discouragement. It's like, hey, these guys were discouraging, and here's how they did it. They told us
say it's false, and the Bible throughout the rest of its
what
tomes
tells us
does
it's
not
false
say
is the content.
It doesn't. You're inferring what is not said there specifically.
Well,
and you told me before at the height of this that you have to be specific and you've got to take the words at their face value. So if you're trying to infer that, then I'm doing exactly the same thing. Only I'm choosing to leave the verse in, and you're saying that they clearly lied about it and can't be trusted. And Moses is reporting.
But I'm also saying that if we're going to leave the verse in, we have to explain how we get Nephilim past the flood.
And because the Bible doesn't specifically say, oh yes, more angels than copulated with people, we don't know exactly. All we know is that Moses said they were on the scene before and then again after, and then we have the
Moses didn't say that.
When he wrote it out inside the Torah. He copied out what somebody else said to him. I'm just saying he said it because he wrote it, but it was really, it was God putting that
just like when that tribe came to the Israelites and said, oh, we live in such a faraway land.
So far away, yep.
Look at our bread. It's already gone moldy. They even had evidence.
Our wine.
Look at our bread. It was fresh when we left, and now it's moldy. And we're told that deception is recorded for us. This is a non-issue. We already talked about that.
It's also not only is it recorded.
You've gone frozen.
Am I froze again? No, I'm coming back. Am I back?
Again. Oh, man. Uh-oh. Here we go. I don't know if either of us are, I'm going to check YouTube right now because I don't know if either of us are on anymore. Seems like we both dropped out.
There we go.
Hopefully the thousands of people that are watching this live didn't.
All four of us.
Here we go. We're back.
Do something else. But no, that, and like you said, they recorded a falsity, but there's also a bigger point that is made in recording that, and it's the fact that Joshua held them to their word. He held them to their word, and it was like once they found out who they're a part of, I guarantee you on the inside, he was like, oh, we told them we watch over him, and they make good on that later on during their campaign through Canaan. So in the overarching scheme of everything here, we're definitely going to have another talk where we can get more into the argument made here, because we're coming up on 2 hours. I know I
feel like we barely got started.
I know, but hey, it gives more fodder for more people to come in and tune in, and I am loving this. I am loving that you're holding my feet to the fire.
Incidentally, let me just point this out. Since we're kind of wrapping it up, obviously, that's part of why this topic of Nephilology has become a topic. It has become Nephilology because you read, even if you just read the one single verse, Genesis 6:4, you're instantly plunged into, oh man, now I got to figure out who are the Nephilim, who are the sons of God, who are the daughters of men. what does it mean that they were mighty and well known? When did they live? It opens up so many areas that are very complicated that's why it balloons and it becomes this gigantic issue. And then, sadly, as we both know, it does, on a popular level especially, become what I call neo-theo sci-fi, which is, boy, you just got to make it all the more exciting and sexy. And I think I might have mentioned to you that if you go to any website that sells books and you type in a search for Nephilim romance, the number of books,
oh my gosh,
novels that are
there's
Nephilim
a lot of
romance
depraved
novels.
people out there, I tell you what.
Unbelievable, man. So it's become like a caricature of itself, that this issue has been discussed, debated, and pored over for millennia, based on one or two verses, not even texts, verses. It's fascinating. That's part of why it's so fascinating, because we can have a 2-hour talk and barely scratch the surface.
Well, hey, and this saves us all the trouble next time. We can just dive on in. But I just say I really, really appreciate you hopping on to talk with me. I have had so much fun tonight, and I hope you have too.
Oh, absolutely, man. I had to apologize for laughing so much.
It's like I do the same thing too. But I have to say that I really do admire. I admire your character. I admire your research. I admire the lengths that you are going to contend for the faith. And I don't think you can really ask much more out of a person who, as like you told me the other day, you're a Messianic Jew, and I think that's incredible. You have a Redeemer, you have a hope for tomorrow, you have a reward waiting for you in heaven, which is we share in that.
Yes, sir.
But tell my viewers where they can find you. If you guys haven't checked the info section already, I do have a link to Ken's website there. But do you have any other plugs you want to put in?
No, I'll just say likewise. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And as I mentioned the other day when we spoke in private, I'm definitely interested in seeing your research, particularly your work on the genealogy of each individual tribe. That's really refreshing that somebody actually got into that. I got into some of that in my books, but not like genealogy for each one. I was like, okay, Anna come from a guy named Enoch, and he comes from a guy named Arba. Period. That's all I know. So yeah,
I'll send it to you. It took me 7 months to put it all together. It was a lot of nights just hunched over my Bible, and then the Easton's Dictionary and the lexicons and all that mess.
I've been there. So anyhow, just truefreethinker.com is, I got everything right there. It's user friendly. If you want books, look at videos, whatever, social networking sites, it's all there.
Excellent. All right.
Appreciate that.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. I apologize for my boomer ways. I will try and find a stronger connection next time I hop on here to do a live stream. I'm definitely gonna take this down and cut out all those parts of me flailing over here trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing. But anyway, you guys have a wonderful night. If we don't see you, good afternoon, good morning, and good night. Ken, thank you again so much. This has been a lot of fun.
God bless.
God bless.
Bye-bye.